everybody doing okay? Welcome to the Microsoft Auditorium Seattle Public Library. My name is Leszek Budziński. I'm a senior librarian and I work at the World Languages Department, particularly Slavic languages. That's my specialty. And today I'm really pleased to be hosting this terrific event. I even gave up my other Sunday to do it, so that's my commitment to poetry, writers and readers, and the Ravens. As you know, following the meeting, we're going to have a reception here, and the tables and the goodies are already waiting for us. And I know my elbows are itching to rub them with yours to prove the point that literary events are really important, particularly events that, with the title "Stealing Light," with the Dark Ages approaching, I steal any bit of light to get guidance anytime, and so if we can do it all together, so much more power to us. Claudia Castelluna, who Washington State, the presiding Washington State Poet Laureate, wrote an unbelievable support of the volume Stealing Light. And she has quoted Maya Angelou with the book that has not been written yet. And I think some of you may disagree, and I would be one of them, trying to make an argument that this may be actually the book that has been written, thanks to all of the participants. Now, without further ado, I would like to proceed with the event. Paul Hunter and Anna Ballant will do the honors, but before they do, I'd like to read a little poem I wrote this morning to ease us into the Crows event. Things crows can do. Much to their delight, they can steal light and spread it throughout before it gets out. For the uninformed, they can scout the world, locate water and air, con gusto and flair, spy an olive twig, bring it to the brig, and proclaim from its mast today's cast. Paul Hunter, will you please take it away from me? Thank you.
We're here to find out if this baby has any legs. Everything in here was written and published between 1991 and 1996. And I found myself thinking of a moment when I met a wonderful poet from the Navajo Nation who told me that they had a custom, the Navajo had a custom that when the baby first laughs, the person who made the baby laugh gets to host a party. It has to pay for the party too, but it's a host of the party. And no fair tickling the baby. You have to make the baby laugh in all those ways that you know how to make babies laugh. And the idea was that a baby can't have too many friends in this life. That we all need all the friends we can get. That when we wait 28 years, suddenly some of the things that we thought and wrote back then, are they still alive? The truth truth is that most of the work written by most of the writers in the world dies before they do. But some of it, with a lucky chance and a great morning and a good cup of coffee or whatever it took, you might have struck it rich. And this is the wealth that we have, stealing light. So, let's begin. Our first reader is Dan Raphael. For over 3 decades, Dan has been active in the Northwest as poet, performer, editor, and reading host. He's a memorable performer. One of the things I asked him when he walked in today was he going to wear his shoes? Because he usually would perform barefoot. He said he may have to keep his socks on because it's getting old and he's getting cold. Please welcome Dan Raphael.
It's great to be here from the other side of the Columbia River. I'll start with accordion as well. Pudding River, which is an actual river of something. It's not a river of pudding. Pudding River. Crows on the frozen grass extend their wings like Edwardian capes, engulfing several other layers, not peeling away like a sarong or a blanket pulled around someone, just pulled from a January river, the car that slid off the road still bubbling for help. Here's the one from the Anthology, which didn't have a title then and still doesn't. The roof of the house, sinking to the ground, is a sweater unraveling in the shadow of sheep, grass holding them to the earth on the roof of the house, stuck between mountain rocks, smooth as eggs, cracking open the grass like capes, revealing death, whose chest is a telescope or some sort of instant transport, because I live in my eyes and have more rooms in my skull than a post-nuclear tenement. Smell the air that raps against the plaster of education. The peeling pain of internal combustion keeps muffing the punchline, but his laughs are like holes in the sky where clouds should be. I pull clouds from my pocket, but they fall and shatter like teapots oozing amoebas of incomplete digestion, reminding me of when and who I ate that with. As light switches argue in vaguely familiar dialects, I lift a piece of floor, let it dry, and fly away, like a butterfly made from the Sunday comics. Next spring becomes a cigar in an oversized hat, skimming the sea for donations, for flabby bonal candles that grow fatter than corn, to snake away the hours, easing windows from red iron hills. A bell rope gives you the choice of falling or being embedded in the ceiling, because that poop floats up like dollops of fat fidgeting on vein walls. The subway is 20 years late, and all the stairs lead deeper into history. Pages so thin you can strain the soap from rainwater. And I'll close with this one. It's newer. It's not in the Anthology, and until about an hour ago I wasn't planning to read it, but there's something about the spirit of the room. And while we talk about the past, we're all very interested in the present and tomorrow and tomorrow after that. Dancing like nobody's watching in a constant surveillance world. When all the muscles inside us, when all the music's made us deaf, all the dancing and runnings put us on wheels, I I feel a bass I can't see. My bones metallicized by rust-belt childhood. Bridge cable piano needs at least 12 miles an hour wind to start a rhythm. How many gulls and crows, the black and white keys, chords of brown sparrows, yellow finches and cardinals no blender can dissolve. The sun's shining, but I couldn't afford my subscription, my prescription. The faucet runs 2 random hours a day with a roll of paint chips to tell me how much I can drink without a rupture. Walls devolving into glass-free windows and unframed doors, as if this patch of abdominal skin can go another day without washing. But when are safe warm hours to sit in a laundromat with exposed muscles and viscera while my skin goes beyond a delicate cycle? Mom's old curlers rise above the city as cell towers, growling and dividing. My tonic bubbles of unclaimed and rejected messages rain like jellyfish with so many offers, invitations, and why do you never answer? That's not a light switch. This only looks like a handgun. Anything can be a lighter, a letter opener, salt and pepper shakers responsible for 3 miracles and 10,000 lunches. When I stop looking at the clock and the sky, my skin breaks out in sunlight. If I don't like how the wind smells, 10 minutes will bring a different food cart. All the cars replaced with teleporters, but old freeway noise tracks maintain the roar that prevents our imagination from flowing out of us so quickly our instrument could choose sides or at least be seriously bruised. We're home. We're hungry 3 ways. The extra bedroom's always busy, as if we live in a silo, a cornucopia where the inventory is in constant flux and filament. In this new green world where all the rainwater goes right to the brewery. I snap open a couple cans to hear, see, and smell the clouds releasing. Clouds looking for a good time, a time they're not subject or objects of. How could the ancients have described marvelous sunsets when they couldn't see blue and the air was pre-industrial? Some visionary Roman turned mad as he saw the Appian Way become the Autobahn, a highway with no exits but plenty of tolls, toll drones scanning your credit line and gene spectrum, as if any scan could tell what I dance like, how high I can jump, how many pictures established in the hanging gardens of my lungs, how the only reason my thumbs don't fly south is I need them as spoons. When the music embargoes the outside while focusing my body on the moment, partners in a ritual of earth drums, city bass, eyes flashing brass, finger reeds, heartstrings, off the charts and in the groove. I'll never do these moves again and don't need to. When they cut the power, police the streets, sever my legs, pour recycled aluminum in my ears, I'll dance even more vigorously, intently, unstoppably. No one will get near me. The music only gets louder. Thank you. Our next vote tonight was, unfortunately, Sally can't be here because he's dead. And David Lloyd White, my best friend, there's a great biography about him in the Anthology. Marvelous man, lived all but 2 years of his life here in the Northwest. And during those 2 years is when I met him in grad school in Ohio. But lived a long time in Vashon, was important in the Raven and Seattle community, and a lot more than that. 4 views of the desert. Oh, wait.
There's water right there.
Oh, wow.
One of David's favorite things was fishing. Okay. 4 views of the desert from Charles Baudelaire. Our Henri. Even in an artificial paradise, you can escape from reality, but still have to come back to get a good steak, even a free meal, at a mission or a soup kitchen. On the streets, Henri smokes a hookah or a glass crack pipe, the froth of hatred, a jaded eye, drunk and exhausted from genuflections, prayers, hunger, eyes still quaking with night's visions. Wine shrinking the liquid sky, the useless stars, black battalions, merged shadows of gray, walking tatters, alive still. Unfortunately, those lovely breasts no longer guard a heart. Sparks of blood, steel gray eyes, and his trembling knees she saw fixed. It was not a healthy fever. These strange flowers, a curtain of shadow, resentment and desire, ice and flame. Time wins by law. A city changes as fast as a young girl's heart. Rock-hard memories, heavy, puny, crack cocaine babies, withering like bad flowers, and a cat's screech cry, totally unconsolable. Her Henri. Too new, young, and strong on the excitement, alive, freedom, the lure of late nights and independence, a secret street flower in profound solitude, gleaming weapons, not quite pendulous breasts, the innocence and sweetness of verse promises. A world of metal and concrete, a world of asphalts and steel, perfumed like a Hell's Canyon wind, sage and street water in the storm at night. She seeks a world less hideous, minutes less leaden. Long eyes, she had long, deep eyes, jealousy lined with suspicions and indolence, like rain, cold as the moon, silent of its own accord. Magic sparks click from her pantyhose. Cool dust like dandruff on the dead calm of despair. The half-starved cry of night things. Lust turning itself over in sleep like a wanton philosopher dreaming alchemy. She had eyes so wicked that no one believed her begging. A look that could sharpen an ice cube. Half open, her robe, her greatcoat, her bed was deep as the grave and the sheets all stained. His Henri. He was charged with nonchalance, easy solutions, like a wind from Havana, musky, night street, gold steel lights and diamonds, all the glitter outside. Habit, no matter how drunk, hatred, no matter how drunken, does not pass out and sleep beneath the table. Oh, he can laugh, but he simply cannot smile. Phosphorescent eyes, each lost second cuts a bits of pleasure into lost also. As bad now as in the past, heaven or hell, at least it will be new. She turned with her terrible hand, eyes ablaze with the hatred which makes anyone fight. Her dreams reflected hell, nixies and pixies, rhetoric and Satan caught in the staircase of the county city building. Vertigo, vertiginous, nonchalant, be a smooth and trembling way of living. She bends over, her breast and his brain catch fire, and he will sob like a fountain of water blessing the night, street evil and skanky, like often gone too long. There on me. The homeless multiply themselves against the wine of the streets. Iniquity, inequity, honey for sorrow, religion for no other options left, bare feet and a bloody spade, the work nearly done, a sweet savage sorrow, alone on the streets and empty, missing the sweetness of the home they never quite lived. Hell-born, a hell born again and again, irony and insanity, they find equilibrium in words, flame-filled eyes, the 1,000 yard stares loose on the clueless local streets. All clocks are brutal in the misted Monday morning. Wine, like a tomb, wraps you warm, fellows the pain. From our love is born poetry and poverty. God created sleep, man added wine. Masked in a shroud of wine, pride makes us equal to God. The blue crystal of morning cannot filter last night's tone-filled edges. Cool as all things break, to man's sore touch, drunk on the wind and the howl of the storm. An angel could damn himself for her. Even the wind is changeable. The summer ends and the street looks long. We are inconsolable. The inconsolable are a breed apart. Thank you.
That woman was Lucy Talahanso, and she said that the baby gives gifts to all the people who come to her party, or his party. And the gifts are sweets and salt. Our next reader is going to read from the works of Marion Kimes, who couldn't be here tonight too, is Greta Harley. She is a composer, a multi-instrumentalist, a performer, and writer. She co-wrote and co-produced the rock music play These Streets, about the untold women of the grunge era. In the 1990s, Greta played in several bands and co-founded the self-defense nonprofit organization Home Alive, and co-produced the compilation CD Home Alive, The Art of Self-Defense on Epic Sony Records. Greta, where are you? There's you. Thank you. You're a warm welcome.
I want to thank Phoebe for inviting me to read Marion's beautiful words today. And I want to congratulate all of you. I'm so impressed with the way this book looks. It's just quite an accomplishment. And congratulations, everyone. Marion Kimes was born on March 28, 1930. She left us on March 31st, 2014, and she had a lot of life between her. The poet Belle Randall wrote on Marion, "In the Northwest, where she has been a vital presence for 30 plus years, friends and admirers of the poet Marion Kimes know her to possess a cheek as hollow and a beauty as severe as Samuel Beckett's, coupled with a voice as clanging as the pots and pans one bangs on New Year's Eve, a metallic voice like the one that caused Katharine Hepburn to lose 2 roles on Broadway before it was recognized for the distinct and subtle instrument it was. Kimes had many chapbooks and books published. The last was Last Year's Horse, the unpublished poems on 9 Muses books in Oregon in 2009. I met Marion in the year 1999 or 2000, I'm not that clear, while I was searching for poets to collaborate with. Marion was introduced to me by our mutual friend and fellow poet Martha Linehan. Marion heard about my project and jumped right in and wrote the poem that became the anthem to my show I called Foxes and Boxes. And we became friends. Marion lives on Capitol Hill. She fed the birds but didn't tell her cat voodoo as she made her way to her throne at the Coastal Kitchen where she held court. I meet her there sometimes to watch a tennis match, a horse race, or have a meal, or even just a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. Everyone at the Coastal Kitchen knew Marion, and she was always happy to introduce me to the people who helped enrich her day. She liked to talk about people that I didn't know as if I knew them. Perhaps she thought I should. She was fully dedicated to her poems, her life's work. She gloriously painful and focused dedication she had. I'm going to read that again. She gloriously painful, maybe painfully, I'm in a room of writers and I'm questioning my writing here. She was dedicated to fellow poets. I'm trying to say that she was so dedicated to her poems and her writing, and she was so dedicated to the artists that she shared her life with. The artist's life was gold, and she treasured it. Marion saw the details and nuance of life and translated her visions through poetry. Leaves, grass, shadows, animals, rain, and war, suffering, death row. She felt it, and she had an artistry to show it, to bear witness. Marion wrote another poem for me once called Composer, which appears in last year's course. While she was writing it, she sent me at least 4 versions through the U.S. mail over the course of 2 or 3 months, always editing. I recognized her cursive handwriting on the envelope, and I unleashed the bleached white paper from it with the typewritten words, some white out involved. Martha and Marion and I celebrated several birthdays together. Marion had a voice of brass, a boisterous, piercing laugh, a keen eye on the world she inhabited, and a will and personality that moved faster and with more veracity than her tiny frame seemed to understand was along for the ride. Well, the world couldn't contain this southern gal, this intellectual and willing inhabitant of this planet. I met Marion in her later years. Her fingers may have been mangled by then, her heart organ may have been struggling, but Marion lived large and her spirit was youthful, still vulnerable, and open to subtle breezes and shifts. I would like to read the poem. She wrote this for my show, Foxes and Boxes, where she performed, drum in hand, to a sold-out house at Poncho Hall at Cornish College of the Arts in the spring of 2001. I had asked 9 poets to write a poem about what Pandora might have let loose, and Marion answered thusly. On Starting Over Again by Marion Kimes. We've no time to think on who bears the sins of the universe. We all bear or succumb. Genes, bones, peculiar gifts. We choose to play or not with all we are, painfully, joyfully. And what we know of the fox falls from a box marked memories tenaciously held. Once we watched gray foxes, a family, those red-rimmed coats of surprise, narrow, stretched muzzles, outsized eyes, thick tails, vivaciously loquacious. 1 male, 5 kids, and to call a halt, mom who limps. Youth spent boarding in Texas sun, the yard on a creek, their schoolhouse. They crept after mom, past privets, through violet shadows, dawn's fringe. 2 elms and a waist-high brick barbecue, their stage. Groom faced fearlessly, dancing to some hot beat. Their wild play stoked our eyes. Up, down, around they went, 6 on a grill, then off again. And daily, abruptly, as the sun rose over the hedge, they tucked their tails, yielding to birds. Curtains, mom yipped, and they melted into Dave's box. You see how I wanted to be her friend, yeah. Called. In Bali, each new day begins with an offering, set in every doorway, exactly in the center, small, exquisite arrangements, rice, fruit, flowers, woven sculptured straw, they themselves form and lit with 1 incense stick. Stepped upon by those who enter, they are broken, crushed, and gradually swept away into the gutter as day fades. In some such spirit, writers lay out their creations, artists the work of their hands, in galleries, cafes, theaters, in festivals, their words break forth upon the air, their works set out exactly must be heard, gazed upon, in a sense trampled and broken apart, lit by a living audience, to be scattered to enter this universe. We are called to listen, observe, accept, or reject art. No one can do our work for us. I have one more poem that Phoebe asked me to read, and I just love this so much. It's a whole other side to Marion. And now we come to making love. And now we come to making love, that dangerous act. Forget arts of touch, erection, orgasm, heady spring, full bloom summer foreplay, all-night harvests. Now it's trust. Trust, italicized, triple strength. Once again, we begin with words. I have not, I carry, I do not. Everywhere, condoms, but we do not. We slip into each other in the utmost act of trust. Lay our lives in each other's hands as we do stepping into cars, telling a work confidence. We really run on kindergarten trust. Hope of trust, both lock and key. We lose breath rather than a chance at trust. Oh, windy, reckless life in the park. I stand and watch peach blossoms swirl and fall. And I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to wish you a wonderful celebration, and I regret that I have to duck out because I have a rehearsal. And again, congratulations, everyone.
Our next reader, Anna Ballant, will be reading her poems and work by Tiffany Midge. Anna is a gem that sheds a brilliant light and works in plain sight. She edited Words from the Cafe in 2016, an anthology of writing. I bet you can get right at that table, from people in recovery. She is also the author of Horse Thief, a collection of short fiction spanning cultures and continents, and she has 2 earlier books of poetry. She teaches adults in recovery from the traumas of homelessness, addiction, and mental illness with Seattle's Path with Art and at the Safe Place Writing Circle at Recovery Cafe. Please welcome Anna Ballant.
If I have any light, it's only because I stole it. And of course, we get the light from one another, so I stole it from you. I'm going to read 2 poems, one of mine in the anthology and another of Tiffany Midge's in the anthology. And I must say that I was struck when the anthology, sort of the proofs came, was that my poem reminded me how long Raven Chronicles has been around. Because my poem is so dated. 50-cent TV, things that, in bus stations, payphones. Nobody had cell phones back then. So this poem sort of captures another whole time, and it's kind of scary to think how much has changed. It's also a waiting poem. I was going through a phase where I was always getting stuck. Car broke down, waiting on kids, whatever. On this occasion, I was waiting for a Greyhound bus, and from London, England, to Vancouver, and I had to take a Greyhound bus for that last little piece, and it took me almost as long to get home with the Greyhound bus and the wait as it did to get from London to Vancouver. So I had plenty of time to write this. Bus terminal. Delays crackle as flow fluorescent eyes glare upon fatigue lined up on plastic bucket seats, where an old man slumps and snores, and small girl sleeps, leaning, legs a-dangle, her mother staring off vacant while the baby twists with fuss. More sleepers, readers, and dull-eyed 50-cent slot TV watchers, their feet propped up on lumpy suitcases. Chatter floats, volume up from telephone trees. Tagalog, Black English, Spanish, anxious, one-sided conversations. "I love you, man," calls a teary voice as the child woman, thin as a reed, treads down her shoebacks. Only the video machines are alive, and whistle, rattle, crash, and flash loud colors roar and ping. But the boys who play in trance are all buried alive beneath big raider jackets and beanies. Near the swing doors, an old woman bent down, stares down at the speckled floor and chews her chew. While the guard, secure in his generic uniform, but insecure about his pimples, struts and wishes that someone would break the law. Now, I'm real happy to be reading a poem by Tiffany Midge because I'm a big fan of Tiffany's poetry. So I've got to sort of abbreviate a little of her accomplishments from here because there are many of them. Tiffany Midge is a contributor and writer at McSweeney's and a humor columnist for the Indian Country Today Media Network. Her poetry collection, The Woman Who Married a Bear, won the Kenyan Review Earthworks Indigenous Poetry Prize and the 2017 Western Heritage Award. Her book of comic essays, Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, is forthcoming from University of Nebraska Press. Tiffany, now I've lost it, she's an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation and is allergic to horses. She put that back, not me. Okay, this poem is not one of her funny poems. It's called Written in Blood. I surrender to Roget's pocket thesaurus. I confess my crime of breaking into this container of words and slaughtering this poem with meta-innuendo. But I needed something. I wanted to gather the dust of 84 warriors and 62 women and children. I robbed from this vault of words language of the enemy in hopes I could capture these people, allow their prayers to reach Wovoka in the final hour before I end this poem. I wanted to know that I am not grieving merely from the guilt of that European blood that separates me from two worlds. I need to know that I am allowed my grief. Sadly, I have failed. This 1961 Cardinal edition thesaurus I depended upon has betrayed me, betrayed my Indian kin. With this language, there are times I feel I am betraying myself. In my search for synonyms for murderer, I find Cain, assassin, barbarian, gunman, brute, hoodlum, killer, executioner, butcher, savage, Apache, redskin. Thank you.
Alicia Hokinson, her first book, Mapping the Distance, was selected by Carolyn Kaiser for the King County Arts Commission Publication Prize in 1988. chapbooks, Phosphorus, and Insistent in the Skin were published by Rooting Heron Press, Waldron Island, Washington. Incidentally, Alicia, I have never seen the phosphorescence of the sea any brighter than in the bay at Waldron Island. Alicia, where are you? Okay, she is going to read her work and poems by Jody Elise.
Thanks. The first poem is the one that's in this anthology. It's called The Iceman, and it's was inspired by the PBS documentary about Otzi, the most well-preserved European mummy who was discovered in 1991 in the Alps from a retreating glacier. The epigraph is from the PBS documentary, quote, "A man older than the pyramids, who walked the Alps before Buddha or Christ, before Aristotle or Plato. Taken by ice and given back, he came to us whole, and we broke him, looking for our past, stashed in his woven bags and boots lined with grass, etched in a bow of yew or arrows of swift viburnum. Another gone down on the dark journey and returned with treasure. Slow berries ripe with autumn sun, news of places where earth gives up its sharpest flint, or a meadow of curative mushrooms far up the mountainside. Did he pray to a goddess of snow or fire, to some Vulcan of copper who blessed his axe? As the storm overtook him, did he cry out for wife and daughter, weaving reeds for their roof by the lakeshore? Unburied by his tribe, unburnt, unhallowed, skin shriveled brown, his fingers curved with blackened nails. The crest around his hollowed eyes articulates the centuries' slow speech of glaciers, blue quiet of alpine skies. Behind his knees, the skin's tattooed with hexagrams for wildness and protection. So from the Holocene, I'm going to leap into the Anthropocene. And this is a recent poem that was also in a beautiful anthology last fall, I think it was, that came out this spring from Raven Chronicles. This is in memory of Sam Hamill, who died in the spring. In the Anthropocene, winter doubles down on spring, slaps fist of rain against the marchers who take to cold streets and chant, their signs laminated against the damp. Some carry slogans written on umbrellas, science, not silence. In the march of ecocide, the small subtractions, one poet's death, loom larger in the scheme of things, where such a voice could wake us before we drown. In the great not knowing, there's only the learning, the path, the way. You brought those ancient poems across the centuries to show us our time and place, rain-filled mountains and rivers without end, part of a continuum we cannot rip, though we have tried. And this poem was also in another beautiful Raven Chronicles anthology called Balancing Acts. It's called Side by Side, and the epigraph is from the San Francisco poet Brenda Hillman, who said, "In forms of life other than human, there is a vitality that isn't trapped in the sorrow." Side by side. All around the clearing, summer's gold fuse firing the alders, the click and sway of juncos riding to grass light under apple trees. First heat from the wood stove kindled to flame, coffee in the blue cup, while the radio reports police have shot another child armed only with his blackness, and refugees spilling from flimsy boats mass at ragged borders. Hummingbirds buzz the closed blooms of honeysuckle twining the poor trail. On the trail to the beach, kingfisher back on his low branch chatters before the dive. Walking barefoot along the low tide selvage, where creamy foam wreathes our ankles, the only footprints on the beach are the ones we are making, the ones the sea dissolves, as if we had never been. So I'm delighted to be able to read some poems by Jodi Eliason, who was such an important voice in Seattle poetry for many, many years, from the 70s on through till 2003, when Jodi moved to Vancouver after the onset of the Iraq War. She couldn't live in the United States anymore. She became a Canadian citizen in 2011, and she died in Vancouver of ovarian cancer in 2012. Of her 11 books, True North, North Way, was published in 2007 by Blue Begonia Press. Her poems, stories, articles, essays, reviews, and songs are found in international periodicals and anthologies and recordings. She earned many grants and awards, including an NEA. In 1999, she co-founded and directed the PCC Farmland Trust, a nonprofit group that works to save threatened Washington farmland. My friendship with Jodi spanned more than 30 years and was cemented in our shared love of the natural world, specifically for Waldron Island, where we both found both solace and sustenance. Jodi lived a life dedicated to, quote, telling the truth and speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves. My community, my culture, is our common humanity. I aspire to speak for that. I'm going to read a few poems from her 1998 chapbook, Desperate for a Clearing. And the very first little poem is called Whatever They Are. When the dark birds fly over, we stand and wave our arms. No, don't come down here. Meanwhile, the birds say, look, they need us, and we almost flew right by. Loving in time of war. After we heard reports about the bombing, saw pictures of people dead and bleeding in the wreckage of their homes, my heart began a slow course downward on rigid wings, dark, shivering spiral. Even lying in your arms, I had to get up and do something, rinse and stack the dishes, fill the sink with soapy water, wipe the counters, make order from chaos, clean up the mess. But it didn't help. Still failing, I tried, listening to women's voices, clear, pure songs. Sitting on one end of the couch, I couldn't move until you swept in, you'd brushed your hair, put on the earrings I gave you, my favorite shirt, and that scent you wear that makes me want to lick your face. You sat down beside me, I laughed with delight, and that pulled me out of it, back into living in spite of the death, a deal in our names, back to remembering how to live peacefully, practicing peace, so we will know how, if it ever comes. And this one is called Kensho is When. Kensho is a Japanese term from the Zen tradition, meaning seeing into one's true nature. Kensho is an initial insight or awakening. You wake up before first light, climb down from the loft into the dark cabin, find a pail, step outside under the shed roof, bare feet on cold boards. As you turn to the rain barrel, from over your shoulder, a blinding white half moon in a starless sky, the impossible color of a hen mallard's wing patch, streams down black massed cedars, silvering their aprons. Nothing moves, no wind, not a sound. Only now, far away, a great horned owl calling. You dip the pail into darkness, hear it swallow water, lift it out a few drops, full, faceted, glittering, brought back in, high, tinkling bells echoing, ringing in your ears. Suddenly grateful for the loan of your life. At this time, in this place, you know you will have to return it someday, and you agree this is appropriate and totally all right.
Paul R. Harding always rocks the house. His spoken music has been performed with legendary Charles Gale, Gary Bartz, Robbie Coltrane, Michael Ezio, Bert Sugar Orchestra, Chamber, and other renowned musicians. He is a former Earshot Jazz Board of Directors president. Notice that? Isn't it uplifting? President Paul Harding. You hear that? And a former Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle Education Director. He currently tutors literacy for Highbridge Voices in the Bronx, New York. Please welcome Paul Harding.
Sweetest, after all the money has danced away with her womanliness, the dark orange flamingos and all the people seem to ignore her but cry. After she lost it and everything stopped spinning round, came to a silver blinding halt, stuck like a giant lashing lightning bolt in the ground. All and the beauty she hit you with became more defined, easier yet more startling, without fear to see as a flame is profound. All the people sang in low, distant notes of the songs of the world inside, deep down. After she became 80, still with her back down, picking, ignoring the new young men, although they could smell her blood, the womanliness, and the cotton coming down through beauty. Like a water snake from the distance, a scurrying field mouse halfway down her bent body still. Picking, yeah, picking, strangely sweetest things ever wanted from hot, hard ground. Unlike this soul could be ever after, all the people knew, and two are bound. What goes around like cherry rhythm, black olive memory, passion's reptile laughter. What so steep into night, sweet as seeds scream before morning flamingo-colored meat. Mist, silent tears, bent over, she reached the dark orange distance, horizon's favorite bird, skin and drooling hair. Standing up straight, dropping cotton almost sang. One sweet high note coming in the same key as the sun. From the bottom of she lost hard sense of time. And every single thing stopped, spinning round. The people warned her not to spit at the moon, held voices of fainting harmony of young, old men counting sharecropper money for all the silence of the short-changed bales, pondering all the people, sweetest disappearance and darkness with her. I am very glad to be here. This is a beautiful book, and being on the East Coast again
traveled a lot with me on musical, through Airshot, through Manhattan, through Seattle, and I never really performed it without musicians. So let's see what happens. Florida, Miami, almost not entirely human. That ageless slinky rhythm, fanning no one's cool moments anymore. She digs the sweat, the Creole Jamaica yellow-eyed devil's omelet, digs. Her sweat, real simple little beads, securely little tight, tiny braids. Her pretty-ass Igbo head, the way she does, her thing still from a perfect black elbow fly. Swat passion, she could get you the first time, the one and only first time. Make you invisible in anyone else's eye. Slowly now, no time in real time, never too hot for tears, Florida, Miami. Too wise, rhythmic, a dark fruit to fall, only a real wild red. Caribbean, Cuban aloneness, drum bleeding. Mother of Billy's strange fruit, sitting, sucking on a piece of ginger. Crayon colored call, warm as breeze, making you identifiable only in a peculiar jungle dream. Long-legged zebra, thigh running across the desert scent, certain memory death, yet tropical qual, dangling from a little Haiti spirits. The motherless son tries to hot spice persuade. Down the beautiful, never forgetting scalding neck, rubbing her African oil skin, beaded forehead, hands without ice water for the body. Florida, Miami, Florida, Miami, Florida, Havana, Miami, causing lulling sparkles, human water, her stark shadow to dull. Disappear like a jackal into the heat somehow. Swamp like reflection, like passion loiters. A camelodic dark breeze. She moves the way she moves, almost balmy. So mean, she's scary clean, standing there. Silent, dangerous, blackening palm, who waits for searing vision to take over. Cool spectrums of zealous foliage. Colors, baby peacock eyes, she is closer to now. Juju dancing to now. Stooping behind the tallest birds, sucking in the salt from the sweetest sweat, human water sweat, no icicles, but hot berry blood. She would spank you the one and only first time, down into the nose, into the mouth. She waits, tea leaf and hot water, a rainforest reason so simple as Tory. Her mysterious temperament when another boat moors. Another man digs the sweat, the blackberry neck, becomes what's lonely at the warm breeze, almost not entirely human. Florida, yeah, Florida, yeah, she'll get you. Florida, that one and only first time. Miami. I'd like to end with a new poem that I wish wasn't a new poem, and I think the poem will tell you why. I'm going to dedicate this to all the wonderful people at Radio Chronicles in all the years, because I was listening to you on it, and a lot of this, I don't know if it can stand up in terms of just time, but I don't know about art. It's like I say, the only geniuses I've ever really known are children, and everybody's in on this, because we got to live. That's an art challenge if I ever heard one. Forgive. Escape by any means into this country. Fences, walls, trunk, custom eyes squeeze, veins like river cities before your hand lets go. They dare stoop down to your face, bending long but not long enough to clear the guilty sky. A morally not responsible, whose actions plead. Now how can you forgive them, forgive us, forgive me? When Council, NRA, ICE, CIA need white, not cover up, puffed up spoils of war, eyes, manifesto enough, voluntary blind until solar system refused to see when law is not forced enough. White cages are just, and just how to trust, hand, rape, and thievery. Hiding like diamonds too deep to dig, tears free. How can you possibly forgive them, forgive us, forgive me? When I run up into the Black Hills, Gold Sharp, Rio Grande, cutting red, flashing corner of lives. Your crazy horse reverse mortgage acres blood flow. Your Caesar belly of Chavez green. silver Sierra Mountains, half-drop white sun without sound. Montezuma runs into Geronimo, heard say love abound, taken away legally, some screaming confused, suddenly alone, cage slum Cuban stars, out of outer space so deeply drawn across. How did you truly hear them? How painfully atone all the lies about being free. How can you forgive us? How can you forgive them? How can you forgive me? Forgive, 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 forgive. Thank you.
Told you he rocks the house. Thank you all. Our next reader, Nora Martin, reminds me that our host, Seattle Public Library and the Seattle Public Library Foundation, would like to have us answer 5 little questions. And they have a box of little pencils over there that are just like they use on the golf course. They have no eraser. Anyway, it's 5 little questions. Please fill it out, give it back to them, and tell them that we love them in some way or another. Nora Martin teaches and works as a public school librarian in Bozeman, Montana, which is to say she is one of the saviors of the culture and the earth. She is author of the young adult novel, The Eagle's Shadow, the picture book, The Stone Dancers, and the young adult novels, Flight of the Fisher Bird and A Perfect Snow. She got me with all her titles right from the back. Where are you? Nora Martin, come on down.
Thank you, Raven Chronicles, for inviting me to be a part of this story. What a marvelous book. Thank you, and thank you to my family who's always there. This is a shortened version of the essay that is in the anthology. It is called Prayer Flags on Barbed Wire. This is Montana. It is cold. It is brown. I'm pinning palm-sized white pieces of paper to barbed wire fence with clothespins. On each folded sheet is written a word, sometimes a sentence, one that I call a complete poem. My prayer flags. A long time ago, words flew around inside me and darted out everywhere like swallows in a huge barn. Now my thoughts are few and labored like my freezing breaths. They're tiny, dried bird bones which I arrange on paper with tweezers. I'm a home educator with Head Start. I visit isolated or transient families once a week to help parents plan and present activities for their young children. 10 minutes ago, I left Lily's kitchen. Her husband is a ranch hand. Their old house comes with the job. So does the heating oil that pushes hot air up through the vents under the table. It feels good. Lily is old, and I'm young, but we're the same age. Lily is heavy with aching bones and a hard face. Her hair is pulled back tight. Sometimes she uses a cane to walk when her knee hurts. She smiles often, but it is hard for me not to stare at the dark place where her teeth once were. Lily loves this old rambling house. She hasn't always had one. It is January, -7 degrees. But as we both paint with her young daughters, she's telling me about her garden plans. She plans to bury all of their struggles in the stony ground the moment it thaws. Lily's prayer flag
be up by late June. There's always a sense of relief when I can put some of my thoughts on the fence. As I look at the stark whiteness of my paper against this large, empty space, I can almost see particles of myself break off and that little scrap and blow away. My thoughts waving in the wind are like shedding dead skin cells out into the big beyond. On Thursdays, I visit Cassandra. She is 22 and has 3 children. Cassandra is smoothly round in her tight jeans and cropped t-shirt. The walls of her apartment are stark. There are no books or toys anywhere. I have brought scissors and crayons for the children. I work with them for an hour while she sits and smokes and tells me about the dates she goes on. She says, "Well, those kids pulled all the food out of the refrigerator yesterday and made a mess when I was sleeping. I kept them in the room all day. It's the only way to control them." In this world, I seem to know many more Cassandras than I do Lilies. The Cassandras bound up in barbed wire, while the lilies plant hopes in the garden. Cassie, get out the wire cutters. Paul's taking a little nap so that he can come back and do the grand finale in style. So in the meantime, you got me. So our next leader is right here, Dale Tremblay, and she is an Onondaga Mi'kmaq Hoyt writer, teacher, and artist. She's been a member of the faculty at the Evergreen State College in Washington State since 1980, where she has mentored students in the fields of visual arts, writing, Native American, and cultural studies. Please welcome Dale Tremblay.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start by reading the 2 poems in the anthology. And the first one I'm going to read is the second one in the anthology. It's called Casa de Cortez, Antigua, Veracruz. Both of the poems are in the anthology are poems I wrote in Mexico. And this poem is about the first colonial house built by Cortez in the state of Veracruz. And it's near this amazing ruin called Zempoala, which is made out of these brown stones. And there's a place in the middle of the plaza in Zempoala where if you stand, you can hear anything in the entire ceremonial complex. It's really startling. And I like to think that that is where Cortez was, when he was given the Aztec noblewoman who was enslaved when her family gave her away because her mother would have been married to an Aztec noble, which is or of course, you know, high class. When he died, she remarried scene was amazing because one likes to think that somehow or other Cortez could have defeated the Aztecs with a few horses and a few soldiers. And it wasn't possible. The reason that Cortez could defeat the Aztecs is because, or the Mexica, was because Malazine, who was fluent in 5 languages, in 5 Mexican languages, and who learned Spanish in a month. I mean, she had this gift with language. And it's because the people at Zempoala gave her to Cortez as a gift that he was able to convince all of the tribes that paid tribute to the Aztecs and were subject to the blossoming war. The blossoms they wanted, the Aztecs wanted, were hearts for a few sacrifices every year to keep the world going. Of course, the Spanish claimed that the Aztecs sacrificed 30,000 people a year, but nobody has time to sacrifice 30,000 people a year. The amount of time that would take is ridiculous. But because the Tlaxcalans and the people in Cholula all fought with Cortez, he was able to defeat the Mexica. And nobody understood at the time that he was going to have such a devastating effect on everyone in Mexico. But he built this house, his first colonial house in Veracruz, in Antigua, Veracruz, not very far from Zempoala. Casa de Cortez, Antigua, Veracruz. Light shifts through leaves of trees that perch atop the walls of this ruin and send adventitious roots scaling down to figure dirt beneath red tile floors and round stones that pave the patio of this old house. The first skeletal remains of a colonial floor plan laid out to make foreigners feel at home in someone else's country. One wonders at Cortez's luck, given as a gift Malinali. At first, he tried to give her away to one of his lieutenants, but realized it didn't matter whether or not he found her pretty. She was his fate. She had a tongue he would use to reshape a continent, to make allies he would later betray as he did her. But at this point in the story, it was her skill with languages that amazed him. In a mere month, she could whisper in his ear words he had learned from his mother. She could answer his million questions, name the unnameable things he had never seen. He was her passage out of slavery. She, a Mexican noblewoman, angry at being tossed away by her own people. In this house, she became mistress, gave orders, advised the conqueror. It was here that she learned about a God whose death would end the need to sacrifice to the Son, and in whose name millions would be sacrificed to foreign greed. One wonders what she understood of her role in history as she learned to eat his bread. As she was baptized, Doña Marina, did she ever guess how much suffering she would help initiate? The people rechristened her Malinche. She worships the chi whose spirit haunts the shadows, these shadows trapped by her ancient desires to have the things the world refused, instead getting an endless notoriety who by aiding the abuser became also used. The next poem that I'm going to read is a poem I wrote in Augustine Lara's house, which is now a museum. Augustine Lara, I don't know how many of you know Augustine Lara, but he wrote much of the music used in the classical Mexican cinema and much of the popular songs of the 40s and 50s in Mexico. He was an amazing songwriter. And my good friend Lydia Wante, Mendoza, who used to be in the education department in the Seattle Art Museum and would do the Day of the Dead altars there before she went to become the head of education at the Mexican Museum in Chicago. And she was my student. So we were really very, very good friends. I used to spend a lot of time at her house in Seattle, and we cooked Thanksgiving together. Her mother, who died when she was 17, was a cook for farm workers. And Tony Lanegra singing Augustine Lara songs was her mother's favorite musician. And so the altar would always be up in Lydia's house to her mom, with her mother's picture on it for Day of the Dead, and it would stay up the whole of November, of course. And so when I went to Mexico, I had to go to the Casa Museo de Augustine Lara and asked the musician who played piano there to play my favorite Augustine Lara songs, one of which is called Palmera. And I quote from that song in this poem. There's a line about palm trees getting a little drunk on the sun. And when you get to that line, it's translated from the lyrics of Palmera. And the Casa Museo de Augustine Lara, Veracruz, for Lydia Wante. I wandered around looking at pictures, photos that measured a lifetime spent writing the music beautiful women loved and sang, women that teased lyrics alive with their tongues, making notes caress like kisses, till a whole generation swooned over this man's words, rhythms, his harmonies that vibrated so gracefully against the skin. And photos were not just beautiful. They sang insouciantly. The spikes of their spirits lit their voices. They gave more light than candles. They were the saints every sinner wished to be. The house sat on a corner, a pristine white and full of wind blowing in over a shimmering sea. Everything felt fresh and full of whispering energy. The piano was placed near a window overlooking the waves, home of conches and luminous fish, a place where palm trees couldn't help but get a little drunk on the sun. I sat on the white divan, and a charming older man played every song I made. Twice I cried, longing for you, my friend, whose mother, a cook for farm workers, died much too young when you were only 17. We who grew up on different coasts, on rock and roll, years later would celebrate your mother's memory, cooking mole for Thanksgiving and playing Tonia La Negra, singing with that weighty woman's voice. All these marvelous compositions that keep memory alive. Oh, how I miss your presence in this room.
Thank you, Gail. And I wanted to just say that this is a big book. It's a fat book. And it is stuffed full of light, lots of light to share. However, we do not have very much time to share it in. So if I could just make all readers aware of the fact that we have a limited amount of time so that we can get through everything, that'd be great. Next up is Bart Baxter. Is he here?
I hope so.
I have not. Oh, there you are, Bart. I didn't see it. And Bart is someone that goes back to those old times I was talking about. And he's someone that has some of the best titles around. So I'm going to introduce you by reading some of your titles of your numerous poetry collections. A Man Ostensibly. I like that. Man with St. Vitus Dance. And last but not least, Peace for the Arsonist, which has personal meaning for me. And let's welcome Bart.
Thank you, Phoebe, and Paul, and the entire editorial staff. He had his heart set on shop rags and creosote, but his mother, God bless her, gave the boy an autographed football for Christmas. In the back by the lumber yard, there are scrap 2x4s and a piece of his undershirt where the chain link is torn, watching his work through the window in the back seat, breathing hard till the sky bubbles and bursts into flame. He leans back with his eyes closed and his fingers wet. Here's the scream of the night watchman locked in the building, and his mother, God bless her, smells the gas on his fingers. Asks the boy if he called the pretty girl who lives down the street. She says, maybe go see a movie, maybe go see a basketball game, but the boy wants to burn. By the time he was 7 on the 4th of July, when the fireworks went up, he was watching the flame from his lighter instead of the night sky. He was holding it next to his pink skin, watching blues and that nectarine color he sees in his sleep. He has dreamed of a little white house down the street with a carport and shutters and trash at the stoop, spray the gas at the front door, spray the gas at the back door, light a small votive candle in the dark where the porch light is out, and the pretty girl living there half asleep in her room with her little stuffed animals and
photos of Bon Jovi, won't ever see the Mariners or go to the movies. So he watches the blonde on the 10 o'clock news, shows him fire trucks and aid cars and flashing red lights. There's peace for the arsonist in the night on the TV when the embers and ashes fly, timber incinerates and drywall collapses. When the door jams are jammed, you can hear the small bodies of babies beginning to burn, smoking and blistering and sucking for air, but not understanding the arsonist. Martin Luther was an arsonist that night in October when he nailed up the 95 Theses on the door of the Castle Church. Kerosene, dirty rags, and a box full of matches, and his head nearly burst with the image of Calvary burning, the angels in agony, Pope Leo, the archbishops, Mary Immaculate tied up in chains, and he nailed up the door so the canons of Rome would ignite baby. He was an arsonist that night in October when he watched as the Castle Church went up in flames. There is peace for the arsonist when he comes to the city. I will pile up my own debris with arms full of trash and the junk from old trunks I've hid in the attic. Andy Kaufman was an artist the minute he stepped in the ring with the Amazon princess. He had torches at ringside and tar on the canvas, a tag team with flamethrowers mounted and armed at the turnbuckles, grease paint and gas fumes, that volatile mixture of genius and vandal. We burned his ass at the stake. With the witches and Christians with laughter and lighter fluid, I can see his eyes light up with sparks from the audience, the ones that he got to but never quite got. We have tendered an opening, self-immolated. Let the arsonist light the red gasoline cans in our alleys before we have to do it. He will burn down the city. Let them come try to stop it with red lights and sirens. Dr. Ford was an arsonist the minute she raised up her right hand and offered the truth. She had fire bombs and fuses. She had sulfur and sawdust, afraid of accelerants and magnesium memories she was happy to keep to herself. But her reticence burned like a river of fire through the dead wood and old undergrowth. I could see how the rats and the vermin ran scared to the cool of the caucus room, caught up in lies they were caught by the fire and the brimstone. So they burned in the spittle of the filthy and pitiful, and they burn to the marrow of their dirty little bones. She has brought in the B-52s, and her words fall like napalm on the floor of the Senate, where the pious and posers and hypocrites are holding their breath. Didn't count on acetylene burning like jet fuel in the room. Smells like diesel and death. They can't gavel away all the blaze and the carnage. The frat boy come justice is choked up and chained to his half-missing, half-hearted cock and bull story, and he whimpers and retches and waits for ignition. He has come to the fire. We have come to the fire, and we know it cannot be contained. There's peace for the arsonist when she carries a torch. There's peace for the arsonist when she asks for a light. There is peace for the arsonist when she lights up the Castle Church. And there is peace for the arsonist tonight.
I just want to say that last part is not in the book. He wrote all that last stuff.
I was going to say that is an arsonist for our times. Next up is Kathleen Alcala, who's going to be reading poems by Rainey Arroyo and Diane Glancy. Kathleen Alcala has been designated a Bainbridge Island, Washington treasure in the arts. I should also say that she is most definitely a Raven Chronicles treasure. And of course, she's one of the editors of this wonderful collection. Her latest book is The Deepest Roots, Finding Food and Community on the Pacific Northwest Island, which is University of Washington Press, 2016. Please welcome Kathleen.
Thank you. And I want to say, you made this book, both readers and writers. That's how this book came into existence. So thanks. I'm actually going to read a little bit from three poets because Belle Randall was on this afternoon. Belle Randall is a Stegner Fellow at Stanford University, has been a recipient of an NEA Fellowship for Poetry. She's had several books and chapbooks and is the poetry editor for Common Knowledge. This is her poem, Pursuing the Runaway Hubcap, a fractured villanelle. An Easter legend in reverse, washed ashore the boy drowned. What goes up must come down. What goes around comes around, getting her feet back on the ground. Venus rubs her eyes and looks around. Like a Mardi Gras Satsendant clown, our love began as our rebirth. Goodbye, goodbye, our little canoe disappearing around a bend in the tunnel of love. Where, Easter legend in reverse, what goes around comes around. Later came the falling back to earth, the getting our feet black on the ground. I'll tell you an Easter legend in reverse, putting the cart before the hearse of how a boy only 6 can drown. Our love began as our rebirth. Tin cans tied to the car in mirth, long waits with the radiator cooling down, an Easter legend in reverse. Next, I'd like to read a poem by Ray Ramon Arroyo, who died in 2010. He was an American poet, playwright, and scholar of Puerto Rican descent. He was a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Toledo, Ohio. His work deals extensively with the issues of immigration, Latino culture, and homosexuality. He won the 2004-05 John Ciardi Poetry Prize for The Portable Famine, the 1997 Carl Sandburg Poetry Prize for his book, The Singing Shark, and a 1997 Pushcart Prize for the poem Breathing Lessons, as published in Plowshares. Kiko. Where's my psychic paycheck or love letter with condom enclosed? I've stripped to my bones in strangers' bedrooms, forced to be my own demon lover. I shower. It's all fucked up and down. I hide in my house reading Foucault, dead of AIDS that he went outside of his body to see. How can my pueblo not be postmodern? See, my mailman is a woman. Senor Andy Garcia, muy macho, but why Andy like in that Andy of Mayberry RFD? Or Richard Rodriguez instead of Ricardo, like little Ricky's last name in I Love You, Lucy. Hola, head full of dreams. Old bills follow me into a new century, like stupid, faithful dogs. And then a bit from Diane Glancy, who's a professor emerita at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she taught Native American literature and creative writing. Glancy received the 2014 Lifetime Achievement Award from the WordCraft Circle of Native Writers, and the 2016 Errol Gibson Lifetime Achievement Award from the Oklahoma Center for the Book. Among her other awards are 2 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships, a Minnesota Book Award, an Oklahoma Book Award, and an American Book Award from the Before Columbia Foundation, and a Sundance Screenwriting Fellowship. Story. For Connie Hart, born 1917, Lake Honda, who learned basket weaving by herself because her Koori mother was not allowed to teach her in the mission. Connie's baskets now appear in the National Gallery of Victoria, Australia. A woman makes a story because there's no shade, and you know how a story branches. A story's a tree unfolding. The leaves hide the beating sun. A story comes just like a tree where it stands after winter. The woman says the tree feels the sun through its bark. It feels the leaves pickaxing their way out. The tree moves all summer on those little plots called stems. You know some afternoons, a story full of leaves and branching forks folds up and lifts. But there has to be leaves falling after the budding all summer, after the shade to stand between. Then grapes gather meaning, not from a tree out of leaves, but from moving to story again. The woman says, when it's cold, the bark looks like a column of hard, dark flames. In winter, you can hold your hand up to a tree.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'd like to welcome Paul Hunter back in the spot that he's so comfy in. And this time to read his work and also poems by Don Wilson. Paul's first collection of farming poems, Breaking Ground, received the 2004 Washington State Book Award. He has been a featured poet on the NewsHour and has a prose book on small-scale sustainable farming, one seed to another, the new small farming. His book of prose poetry, Clownery, in lieu of a life spent in the harness, is his latest book and was published last year. So please welcome Paul.
First, Don Wilson was born in New Orleans into a large Cajun family, so you know he was tall and wide and loud and surprisingly delicate. He attended McNeese State University in Lake Charles and served in the Peace Corps, where he got kicked out for smoking dope in Morocco. He arrived in Seattle in the 1960s as a visiting volunteer. I met him in the Soundview Cafe where he was washing dishes. In Seattle. He co-founded the Dogtown Poetry Theater with Joe Scozzi, was a driving force in the founding of Red Sky Poetry Theater, along with Joe Kepler, Tom Parson, and Judith Roach. And we need an anchor and a stick to beat on it. Men are slow. Men are slower than women. Men are slow. Men are slower than women. Men are slow. Need a ceremony. Need a toast. To enter, try to feel, tell lies, spin myths, have a social form. Men are slow to understand the moon. See all the lights in their eyes, storytelling, drumming in a circle, calling animals with twin voices. Men are slow to share hearts, but in time, times change. So much silence looking for courage. Men are slower than women. Men are slow. Yeah, I finally got to play pipe guitar on the levee and in the French Quarter, and I finally saw Don years after his death in 2003. May 8th, died in his sleep in the afternoon in his bed. Maple leaf. Traditional, paintless plank style, the best music 7 nights a week under a floral, beaten tin ceiling. A floor worn to bare bone by dancing, science of Clifton, King Zydeco, Bubu, Chavez, and Terence Simeon. Maple leaf is to dance. Water is to life. Didn't just dance back and forth. Lust danced the Cajun two-step. A king kind of gyration. Man to woman become armature, spin faster than an eye can follow, whirling in different directions, defying laws of momentum and human endurance, a strange denim of cloth being woven, every smile of strutting human form. They write their own laws in that heat. They write their own laws in that heat. Yeah, they do. And then the poet Paul Hunter, executioner. We were hippies sitting there in a sweltering bar in the 60s in Mankato on a muddy little river. The Sioux had swept down like a flash flood a century before, when a red-faced timber cruiser with his ball cap on backwards, 6'6", pot-bellied belligerent, pulled up a seat and shouted in my ear how just that day he had surveyed and cut the last virgin walnut tree in all Minnesota. He said it had belonged to an old farmer who held out to his dying breath, but then his widow had been moved into a rest home while the kids went ahead and settled the estate because they had waited enough. And you couldn't believe a tree could grow that magnificent, reaching up and out from a trunk near 18 feet around, measuring 80,000 board feet, enough to make a dozen houses from the ground up out of pure walnut. If you can imagine what that might be worth. And you couldn't even tell how old it was because the heartwood was so black the rings all ran together. And standing on that stump the size of a Cadillac, seeing the hole it left, it felt like it left in the sky, got to me for a minute. And while he swirls his beer to wash down that lump in his throat, I lean close and ask why he couldn't leave it be. He says, I hear what you're saying. I hated cutting that tree. You think I don't have feelings, but you know, business is business, and there's plenty more guys where I come from who fell and buck her soon as your back is turned without so much as a by your leave. So why shouldn't it be me doing what has to be done? Not so much for the profit, but to keep off the butchers and see that the job is done right. I'm going to skip over there's a long one in here for you to read that I won't. Passing over. I wrote this 2 elections ago. Passing over. And it's about voting. In case anybody. These evenings, geese flying south, their dark skeins and threads pulled apart, wound together in the pale air, passing over, shuffle positions and trade leaders every few miles. Let someone younger and stronger battle away to the front, share the fatigue, the despair, breaking through this blind chill to scout a safe landing, settle for rest, frozen fodder. Identical, plaintive their calls, scattered over the shoulder, announce the position of each repeat what those drawn after must help every leader remember, have to know and keep knowing by endless, persistent reminders how all are meant to arrive.
Thank you, Paul. Well, I'm a woman, so I'm going to be quick. I'm going to make a quick sales pitch, which is stealing light as we come into the darkest time of the year, and also as we are living through times when darkness and light are battling one another on a daily basis, and it's not clear what the outcome is going to be. So we all need some stealing light as we go into this darkness. We need more than just November 6th. Holidays, the perfect gift. Give your friends and relatives some light this holiday season. Help sustain their spirits. And that's my pitch. Next up is Jocelyn Moody. Jocelyn Moody is the Sue E. Denman Distinguished Chair in American Literature and Professor of English at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where she teaches Black autobiography, feminist theories, and 19th century African American literature. She is founding director of the UTSA African American Literatures and Cultures Institute. Please welcome Jocelyn Moody.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the honor of being invited to have my work included. I'm an old-fashioned teacher, so I'm going to take advantage of my turn at the mic to invite everyone who can and wants to stand. I don't care if you raise your arms, I don't care if you raise your body, I don't care if you stand the entire time, but thank you for sitting this long and do whatever you need to feel comfortable. I tell my students, raise your right arm, raise your left arm, swivel your hips, swivel your hips, so go the other direction, do whatever you need to. Thanks for enduring.
Not gonna work.
Okay, I'm going to get started. Someone was mentioning earlier, I guess several people have, that, it's kind of a mind trip to go back 24 years in my case to writing my essay. When we won the Nobel Prize, I guess that was September, October 1994, a long time ago, and I've lived in 3 cities since then. And now I'm going to have siblings for the rest of the evening. So I lived in Seattle and I moved away in 2003 by way of St. Louis, and now I live in San Antonio. And so it's kind of, it's a meandering road back. At any rate, here we go, when we won the Nobel Prize. I've had unprecedented confidence in my work in African American literature ever since I heard over NPR while getting dressed for work that Toni Morrison won the 1993 Nobel Prize for Literature. All that Thursday morning, I kept catching my reflection sidelong in my bedroom mirror, my rearview mirror, the glass door to my office building. I turned full face, grinned widely, hugged myself. I kept thinking, oh Lord, can it be someone who looks like me has walked off with the world's most distinguished literary prize? It was dazzling. Morrison was dazzling, and somehow it made me dazzling too. I couldn't wait to tell my students, couldn't help greeting everyone with, have you heard the good news? Morrison's honor signified my personal salvation. The day after, I was just as elated. I even introduced myself at a gathering for new graduate students, saying, I'm Jocelyn Moody, and I'm excited beyond words that Toni Morrison has won the Nobel Prize. I was mortified by these autonomous words, stunned that they had escaped me. Then the room broke into applause. That kind of response, the absolute joy of almost everyone I know at the good news, so sustains my own gratification. I'm sure it'll be years before the thrill subsides. Just this fall, and that would have been fall 1994, just this fall, I lent my copy of The Bluest Eye to a friend who couldn't quite comprehend the complex portrait I drew of my mother after a trip home. Only after she read Morrison's incredibly exact characterization of sugar brown girls who, like Mama and me, come from Mobile, Aiken, from Newport News, from Marietta, from Meridian, could she piece together the paradox that frustrated me. I wonder that Morrison never met my mother, Mobile born and reared, when she writes, when you ask them where they come from, they tilt their heads and say, Mobile, and you think that you've been kissed. I read and remember the fruit man's wagon, cashmere bouquet talc, brown bags twisted into hair curlers, whispers in the night about Nicky, and all my agonized youth comes back to me. Southern women's fastidiousness, our self-loathing and sexual repression are supposed to be grievous, I know. But I'm lost in a wash of loneliness in the beauty of Morrison's prose. Even descended from colored Mobile women who hate funk and poor folk hate poor colored people for their funkiness, I read Morrison's reconstruction of my repugnant past and want to be a girl of 9 again and sent to the corner store for a square blue box marked Kotex and powdered aspirin called Goody, folded into translucent paper. Once I discovered Morrison's novels on my own, I made a spring ritual of reading Sula. Every Mother's Day, I'd march into a Mormon temple in western Missouri for my college's graduation. Morrison's slender second novel tucked into the hollow sleeve of my borrowed commencement gown. When the faculty were settled for the 4-hour ceremony, my friend Judy and I would go to the bottom to witness there Eva's murder by fire of her boy, Plum Piece, Eva's efforts to save from fire the beautiful fuck-loving Hannah Piece, while her granddaughter Sula watched, curious. We buried Sula as the last graduate across the stage and silently pledged to each other undying friendship in the wake of Nell's anguished loss. The ironies of day and place and text were lost on me until the spring after I had left Judy at that college. I thought Morrison's second novel on the second Sunday in May only signified my students' graduation, until I felt my summer ritual outside Missouri could not commence without the sweet and raw ritual that Sula had become. I no longer read Sula to mark the coming of summer, probably because as often as I can, I make Morrison's work as writer, editor, mother, the stuff of my life. Her novel, Beloved, became the subject of my first published scholarly article. At the center of my poetry classes are the magnificent poems of Lucille Clifton, poems Morrison edited in her Random House days, the excruciating blues novels of another extraordinary African-American woman writer whose work Morrison edited in those days, Gail Jones's Corregidora and Eva's Man, or classics I teach again and again. In an audio interview with Kay Bonetti, Morrison spoke about her single parenting of her 2 sons. They don't need an author in the house, Morrison explained patiently. What they need and what they deserve is a mother. When my own son treads on my last nerve, Morrison's statement fortifies me. The strength to endure is one effect of Morrison's rare and precious gift. Joy in celebrating Black life is another. Just as her most admired characters, one of her most admired characters, Hyland did, leads a recalcitrant prodigal boy into a respectable manhood, Morrison's gifts of power pilot us to a state of grace where we are at once humbled and redeemed.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Makes me want to go back and read Toni Morrison's work all over again. Next is James Bertolino. And James Bertolino has taught literature and creative writing for 30 years and is now retired from a position as writer-in-residence at the Willamette University. His first book was published in 1968, and his most recent, of 27 titles, appeared in 2014. And that one is called Ravenous Bliss, New and Selected Love Poems. Please welcome James Bertolino.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do is read three short poems that were all published in issues of 1993. That's back when I was writing good poetry. The first one is entitled Whales. In the mountain's white expanse beyond the tree line, we learned Buddhist holy men come again as humpback whales. The greater their mastery, the further back in time. I lost my place. Okay, now I got it. Here's one called The Swallow. Flowing downstream, sunlight became liquid. She felt it reaching into her ears, her lips. No longer her being carried by the stream, she was the stream. And the sun's photons were tiny explosions of feeling. She became conscious of deep vibration and of moving more rapidly. Her liquid body shot over the lip of a waterfall and off into space. She broke into thousands of droplets, each a point of ecstasy. She was a sigh of pleasure as she spread into mist. Then a swallow flew through her. She knew a loving the universe finds in the swallow's existence, the way its sensual form becomes intimate with damp air. She felt water on her wings. Here's one called The Jeweler. I know a woman who places snakeskin under glass, who would hold a mountain stream. In her hands a porcupine quill stitches the density of stone to the liquid of pearl. The spirits of crystal and metal
gather where light is her partner. I know a woman who is intimate with bones. I think there's another one in here, but I can't find it. Oh well. I'll finish up with the poem for you, for all of you, for being here, for being supporters of poetry, and with thanks to Phoebe Boucher. I toast. May you always have art to charm your days, a sensible hearth, and friends as dependable as gravity. May the wind and creatures be as music to your evenings alone, and may your dreams leave you renewed. May you have an Appaloosa to ride the outline of blue hills, and nothing that sickens, and no black sticks.
Okay, we're coming into the finish line, so hold on to your energy and your light. Please welcome Fatima Lim Wilson, who is originally from the Philippines, where she served as the confidential assistant to the spokesperson of former Philippine President Corazon Aquino. I'm going to move through this. Her first book, Wandering Roots from the Hot House, was awarded the Philippine National Book Award for Poetry. And she's got a bunch more accomplishments that I'm going to ask to move along, so I read them, and let's welcome.
This first poem is my attempt to encapsulate in a few lines my country's history of colonization, corruption, and national calamities. But I do love my country. I still convey that in the poem. I miss it immensely. Where I am from, and I answer from the Philippines. 7,000 and more islands scattered over the Pacific like the brown-green clusters of Carabao turd. 105 million people shouting at each other over the barriers of the Sierra Madre and the Celebes Sea through the din of fry sparrows and reconnaissance planes. Natives with Chinese eyes and Malayan skin, Castilian ears and made in the USA minds, we cross ourselves in the pit before the cockfight. Oh, we are slow, how slow we are. We fall asleep under the shade of the palm trees. Our hosts rust in the fields. The tuba rushes to our brains from our bellies. The women change in our coconut fermented dreams. Maria Clara has goat milk skin, Laguna de Bay eyes, and teeth. Her breasts swell larger than the Upo gourds. Oh, how slower are we still to waking. One Tamad took 400 years. He finally got rid of the European devil with a stone-sharpened bolo, but blinded by the stars and stripes, poor one embraced the 6-foot Santa Claus. We still are dreaming of a pure white Christmas in our land of constant summer and Lent, beating our breasts, reenacting the bleeding passion of Christ, beating down the angry spirits of our past, our bare feet turning and turning the barrening earth. Oh, but we are quick to change from one master to another, ready to scrape and smile, even to speak in the the conqueror's tongue. Buenos dias. Hi, all. Konnichiwa. We are the poor Filipinos, richly blessed with malarial squatters, Malacanang Palace puppets, and inflatable peso bills. How can God not be kind to us? Surely he sees our lifted faces, wet with the manna of monsoon rain. From the Philippines, I move on to Germany, where I saw just how the Brothers Grimm's were indeed inspired by fairy tales. It was magical. But when I visited the Black Forest, I then realized how those fairy tales also could be full of violence. And this is my version of Grimm's fairy tale Hansel and Gretel. But instead of a brother and sister, I turned it into a love story with a twist. Tales in translation. In Karlsruhe, the Black Forest begins. We wander in, and we are where the Brothers Grimm want us to be. You are a small boy, and I, the smaller girl who must hold hands, because the last of our crumbs have been taken to beak by the birds. What happens next is left unsaid in the story. We kiss. Somewhere in the dark, green darkness, a witch is watching us. She is smacking her lips, rubbing her sticky hands together. We know she is there, but we are dreaming of a house made of sweets, where treasures lie untouched in heaps, and where giant cages swing empty. In the big black mouth of an oven, we have pushed something vile to its end. And in the sweet, smelling house, now ours, we kiss and kiss again. The poem in the anthology is very long, so I'm not going to read it, but this final poem I'm going to read was published in Raven Chronicles, and it's my favorite poem. It's about my most blessed experience in life, and that's nursing. I don't want to embarrass my son who's here. I have 3 sons, but I always told them I hated nursing. I would wake up in the middle of the night. It was a nightmare. But now that they're all old, gosh, that was the best moments of my life. The nursing hour, morning, and first light filters through, unreeling like an old movie. Complete silence whirs, a mechanical bird trapped in the ear, until you cry, and I rise, shivering from the ice sheets of sleep, brought back to life by the summons of your hunger. In the short distance from one room to another, I move, metamorphosis of my mother. Somehow I know her cues by heart, just as you know, even in deepest sleep, how to harvest roses from my shapelessness, feeding off the honey of my simplest joys, manna of memories. And I too am nourished, made a goddess by your need. Before the day progresses into its cinematic splendor and background noises muffle our mind, let us rock back and forth in time, shared rhythm of my past clasping your future. Ocean swirl of the womb, love call of the heart's Titan drum. Thank you.
Stefan McClosta has worked as staff writer for The Stranger, film editor for SeattleSquare.com, and guest film curator at UW's Henry Art Gallery. He's read on NPR, and his work has popped up all over the place, including ad copy for a bridal boot camp. Please welcome Stefan McClosta.
My thanks to Phoebe and Kathleen for opportunity once upon a time. I can't tell you how cool it is to share the podium, however varied your voices. The compassion is This is based on a late night walk in Pioneer Square and a song called Cueca Solo by Sting, Rubén Blades, Eric Clapton. They dance alone. The pumpkin grinned in pale misty moonlight from the top of a dumpster in Occidental Park. Halloween trash strewn on wet cobblestones, candy and gum wrappers, broken wine bottles, a fluorescent green condom and cracked plastic skull. Strips of orange and black crepe paper hung from a maple and wound past a totem pole. Outlines in chalk of a woman and man lay on a brick walkway, holding hands like lovers. The pumpkin rocked on the dumpster, grinning like he'd seen it all before. Inside the pumpkin, a rat looked up from its holiday feast, furry cheeks bulging with stringy gold flesh, guarded, cautious, alert to a change in the cool evening mist. It peered through the lopsided eye of the pumpkin, jagged and carved like the smile. The rat sat and listened, nervous, twitching, rocking the pumpkin. Whisper of leaves, gossamer melody wove through the night. The rat pulled back and stood on its hind legs to peer from the top of the pumpkin, pointing its ears and flexing its toes, holding a mouthful of partly chewed pulp. The rat saw a woman at the edge of the park, dancing alone in the moonlight. The woman sang softly and danced barefoot circles, turned pirouettes down the burnt orange brick. Her black skirt rustled, bracelets jangled. She held out her arms for an invisible partner. Silver streaks in black hair glistened in moonlight, framing the caramel sheen in her face. Hair down her shoulders, hanging in waves on an ivory sweater. As she turned, scarlet thread in her skirt swirled like ribbons of blood, her eyes dying fire, turning to coal. The rat watched the woman, then looked beyond her, past the soft singing, watching the shadows congeal and draw near. The rat looked around and slid back in the pumpkin as the woman spun circles and danced. Men appearing alongside the park, masked in plumes of warm breath, boots, bandanas, sweatshirts, straw hats. They wore what they'd carried in bags, bound together with tape and old string. In shapeless frayed coats, they gathered at benches, leaned against trees. They all watched the woman and murmured in Spanish as she slowly spun circles and danced. One popped a thermos and passed around swallows of café con leche, steam from the lid that served as their cup. One offered smokes, lit them for neighbors, a cup of brown hands around a bright orange flame. They all watched her dance as the full moon was setting. They watched and saw faces, dreams lost in time. At the hour of dawn, on the Day of the Dead, the woman danced on as pale morning light touched the mist. Then she stumbled, arms folding, and spiraled to earth, a bird shot down from the sky. Someone stepped forward, another restrained him, as if lending help would show disrespect. They watched her rise slowly up to her knees, clutching her skirt as it held all she owned. She knelt, head bowed, still as a statue. The one who stepped forward turned to his neighbor, an unspoken question lining his face. "Los desaparecidos," was the reply. "She dances with those who have now disappeared." "Quién?" someone asked. "Who's disappeared?" The answer arose from one who stood out, lighter in color and wearing a suit, threadbare, old, a wide lapel style, not seen in some years. "Sometimes in my country," words falling soft, hourglass sand. Women done solo, with lost sons and husbands. Taken from home, middle of the night, pulled off the street, plain light day. He looked to one side, face cloaked in shadow. This one steps with her son and also her long-vanished husband. She dances with both on the Day of All Saints. Their pictures are pinned to her sweater. He gestured toward black and white portraits next to her heart. One tinted sepia looked very old. The woman stood slowly, held her arms open, embracing a partner she alone saw. Resting her head on a shoulder unseen, grief beyond measure, as if holding a cold, lifeless hand. Murmurs arose from the men who were watching, a sigh from deep in the shadow. The woman said nothing and turned from their voices, her bracelets tinkling like bells. "Why dance in this place? How long have you been here?" "My second week now, and people look at me as if I'm not there. Except for La Migra, I was nearly caught twice." "But why did she dance here? And wasn't she singing?" "Look around for your answer." Standing and seated in pale misty light, the men looked like ghosts in a house with no walls. Her loved ones will visit wherever she dances. And no, she was crying, not singing a song. The man in the suit then walked to a dumpster, measured and sure through the cobblestone park. He glanced at a pumpkin on one of the lids, opened the other, rummaged inside, pulled out some blossoms, wilted and dry, marigolds, coppered as dark ancient suns. He watched her spin slowly as mist burned away, her hands reaching out to the dawn. Shuffling over, he bowed as if offering gifts during Mass. Bouquet at her feet, ashen and bloody. He whispered and slowly departed. Passing the dumpster, he nodded as if to a friend. The rat stuck its head up the pumpkin's left eye and peered at the now vacant park. Morning light through tall trees, a few scattered leaves. A lone raven shrieked and flapped in slow circles. Band of gray pigeons picking at crumbs. As if by arrangement, they rose as one body, a wave curling into the sky. The rat watched the pigeons and leaped from the pumpkin, dragging its tail through the lopsided eye, rocking the pumpkin, grinning like he'd seen it all before.
Alice Deary's light is steady and sure. Her collections include Tremolo, Strangers to Their Courage, Clear Water, and Stages of Twilight, that last chosen by Raymond Carver as a King County Arts Publication Award winner. Please welcome Alice Deary.
Hi, it's great to be here, and it's very humbling. It's just been wonderful to listen to all your voices and all the different ways that poetry can be, and everything that you've done has been beautiful. I'd like to thank Chronicles, too, for many years of work and belief in poetry. Both the poems in the anthology were written at a time when I was teaching full-time and my daughter was small, and to write a poem was amazing in that kind of atmosphere, and to get one published was a minor miracle. So thanks very much for helping me understand in those times that I could keep writing. I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm just going to read one of the poems from the anthology, and then I'll read a short poem from my new book. This one is called The Woman Who Loved Dahlias, and it's for my paternal grandmother, whose name was Alma. And I never knew this woman. She died several years before I was born. But I found out later that I had a very close relationship with her. Just to remind you that dahlias, at least most of the time, need to be taken out in the fall and then put back in the spring. I guess some people manage to winter them over. And the poem is addressed to a you, and that you is Alma, my grandmother. The Woman Who Loved Dahlias. I grew them because as a kid I stood under the stalks which reached my father's shoulder, while Aunt Olive, his sister, showed each one. In the spent August garden they spill their pink, purple, red, orange, unfold their origami flutes and pleats, the pieces fitted in an intricacy we reserve for thinking of ourselves. A shapeliness we're always looking for, watching a stranger, because at that moment it's hers. Maybe every life is only childhood moments revealed. I held to those dahlias through apartments, a husband who grew vegetables, keeping things unquestioned, just as they are, flowers deep in their sunshine, my father and his sister for once forgetting their bitterness, for once not sending me away. When I finally got a piece of ground, I bought the wrinkly knobs, old women's hands in stealth, and planted them in silence, assuming magic took care of its own. Failure in shade, failure on a shallow bank. Finally, the summer I came to the plot which fed the eager rush of leaves, buds, color. By then, I was middle-aged myself, and on a visit, Dad suddenly said, "Beautiful dahlias, they were my mother's specialty." Like the end of a story which seems elusive until you hear it, but when you do, it's the inevitable one. I watch you, Alma, someone I never knew, whose picture I can barely place, whose neat Sunday china graces my table. Come toward me, a shadow making its way into form as morning might keep lightening an object. Why I wouldn't have found in garden books what I wanted are like minds, the woman of you in me. In the rigid schedule a farmer's wife needed to keep an irascible man on task, you squandered time each fall bringing in bulbs to overwinter, planting them new in spring. A summer of flowers outlasted a winter's canning. In this way, you are saved, I connected. When the dahlias go this summer, the loss will be one after gain, a loss I can mourn. My ritual of keeping, how your hands will lift bulbs from cold November mud. Help me carry them indoors. And this is from Hunger, my newest book, which was beautifully published by Moonpath Press in Tillamook, Oregon. And this is called Camouflage. It takes place in the northwest woods out on the Olympic Peninsula where I live. And if you walk along the trails in the national park, you often see elk. Camouflage. Through cedar dusk above the river flats, 2 elk in velvet stand watch, surrounded chest deep by sword fern. My husband motions quiet. Then, like bandits springing in ambush, the entire herd rises, 30 cows and calves, but turning from us, melts into the ferns like one creature, the leathery swords uncannily moving. If we try to follow, we'll get lost or mired in the marshes. We'll get lost or mired in the marshes. Ours, the path cleared, they to their rhythms of brown, dun, and green. How it is when at a moment of approach, the hidden shows itself, then vanishes. Over the years saying, let's go back, that one spot, as if our glimpse belonged to geography or time.
That was Alice Deary. The next reader is Larry Lawrence. His books include a full-length volume, Life of the Bones to Come, chosen as a National Poetry Month selection, and a chapbook, Scenes Beginning with the Footbridge at the Lake, from Brooding Heron Press on Alderney. Please welcome Larry Lawrence.
Thank you all for being here, and those of you who stayed. And for some reason, I'm remembering a line from Andrew Norvell to his Chloe Mixes. And the line is, but at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. So I will just read the one poem that's in the anthology. I will totally thank all the people involved with Reagan Chronicles through the years, and the thousands, literally thousands and thousands of hours it took to assemble all these wonderful voices. I put some hours in there too. In fact, I was a proofreader for Ceiling Light.
And typing?
Yes. And Phoebe accused me of being a comma freak. Was it a comma addict? Something like that. Okay. So this is a poem I wrote when I was a teenager when Raven Chronicles first published me. Love poem in winter for L.R. There is no moon in this poem. If there were, it'd be full. There's no peace in this poem. If there were, it'd be borderless, sleep unguarded. A few lights of kindness to late travelers. There's no clitoris in this poem. If there were, it'd be yours, shining and wet. A blue ocean far off prepares itself There's no whiskey in this poem. If there were, it'd be the better times, better times. What there is this, a pie tin frozen to the porch. Suet, stale bits of pumpernickel, and the poor, lucky sparrows that have entered this morning. Thank you.
Yes, that was Larry Lawrence. Thank you, Larry. Ann Spires is Vashon Island's inaugural poet laureate, the first and current president of Vashon Audubon. Her chapbooks include Tide Turn, Volcano Blue, and A Wild Taste, Long Climb into Grace, the Herodotus poems, What Rain Does, What Does Rain Not, and Bunker Trail. Please welcome.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Written Chronicles. I asked Phoebe if I could read this poem, and she says, oh, no, someone else is doing that, but they didn't. So she told me to read The Killdeer by David Lloyd Whited, and she said it was a poem to be noticed. And I read it, and David's ability to both contract the phrase and to do the full phrase was wonderful, all wonderful. The killdeer. The killdeer, frantic, broken wing, crying from the ground. The motionless sun cloaked in a shadowless sky, in which nothing moves but the bird's crimson fear. The rugged dance of her wings filtering the truth of the killdeer cry. Like snow in April, like a water spout funnel cloud in the mid-sound, like a full-blown tornado, baseball-sized hail here in this early northwest spring, the slap, crash, violence of lightning, the thunder, all of it filtering the truth of this bird's cry, the wing which is not broken, wavering awareness of my own frail shadow passing finally out of this dream. Too small, too quickly, savor each day and leave it well. Take only the knives and your fishing gear. All else is illusion, and nothing else is yours. You can't even trust your breath or your blood. And yeah, the killdeer's lying about her wing. In the 40s or 50s or 60s, Muriel Gouberlet was mucking through all of the seaweed in South Puget Sound, and she wrote a book called Seaweeds at Ebb Tide. One of my favorite books that I could put in my coffin when they burn me up. And this poem, Dressing the Salmon Queen, Olympic Peninsula, is out on the coast. And when I say to people, why go to Paris when you can go to Cape Lava? Why go to the Louvre when I found after 30 years ago, the short longhouse? Dressing the Salmon Queen, Olympic Peninsula. Knee-deep in seaweed, she slid with each step, stuck in racks so fresh, isopods still twitched on the slippery surface. Not even the sand fleas had claimed it yet. Amazed, she knelt, gathered armfuls from mounds so bright, the seaweed glittered, flashes of brown, red, and green, festoons of taffeta fit for a salmon queen. Ribbon and eyelet, ravel and frill, caught in wonder, she selected sea lace and sea laurel, draped red labor and fringe, wound black tassel and blister rack, smoothed color changer and confetti, hung whip and bladder, picked sea rose and took red wing. Robed in sargasso silks, she turned seaward, saw the silver break the sea surface. The salmon came running, groomed for the bride, hot in the rack, awed by the shreds, dressed in the gown, rattled for Edens on the hoop of the sea and the moon.
Ann Spires, thank you again. Janet Yoder, our last reader. Her writing has appeared many places, and she is currently at work on a collection of personal essays inspired by her friendship with Skagit tribal elder, the late Bonnie Yoder. Please welcome Janet Yoder.
Well, we are almost to the end of this marathon of literary riches. Thank you all for all the words you have shared, and thank you all for being part of this. This piece that I'm about to read is short. I'm all that stands between you and cookies and cake, so it will not take long. But it's, I believe, the first piece I ever had published. So for many reasons, I thank Raven Chronicles. And this piece launched me on a path that I've been on ever since. River Talk with Vi Hilbert. We launch. The Skagit pulls gently on our inflated raft, inviting us further. It's winter on the river. Clouds hug the mountains on either side, squeezing a misty spray on our heads and bundled bodies. Around a bend we sight our first eagle, one of many that we'll see. They've come to feed on spawned-out salmon. We've come to admire them. We've also come to be with Vi. Skagit tribal elder, storyteller, and teacher of the local native language called Lushootseed, Vi Hilbert, Takshabu, has come to visit her Skagit country in northwestern Washington state, to be back on the river of her childhood and to remember. We come upon more eagles. They sit regally on the branches, watching us float by below. Vi calls up to them, "Hey, Witter, Sagwach!" Go and fly now. They spread their wings, sweeping their way downriver to await our further admiration. The ancient language carries across the water and up to the trees. Vi addresses some of the eagles as Ryutsu, babies, or Lugwug, teenagers. But there is no mistaking the Hek Siag Yakula, grand and most honored eagle. Completely white-headed, he sits on a lower branch so that we may admire his wise old face. Vi talks to him and then tells us, he's saying, "Yes, I know I am beautiful. I'm glad you are watching, and I'm glad you've come to visit me." The babies perch on higher branches, less sure of their floating guests. Would the eagles have flown if Vi had asked in English? I like to think it only works in Lushootseed. She smiles as she answers. There is no doubt the language carries power. I knew that the first day I heard it in Denny Hall at the University of Washington. Vi stood in front of our class with her head high, arms lifted slightly, hands forward in the traditional stance, showing respect for her listeners. She spoke to us in Lushootseed, and though I didn't understand a word, I knew she was welcoming us to her home. It thrilled me to hear the sounds that belong to this place, sounds that awaken old echoes. Then she began to teach us a little of that language. Instead of starting with words for book, notebook, pencil, desk, and chair, our first Lushootseed word was sulad, salmon. Then came spads, bear, bashchuk, mink, skagwads, deer, and of course, Stula, river. Now she speaks some of those first words she taught us. The sounds echo on the river of her birth. All of us in the raft have heard Vi speak Lushootseed many times, and some of us even know a bit of the language thanks to her teaching. But it's different here on the river. We're finally hearing it in the right place, where this language was spoken for millennia by Vi's ancestors, where Vi learned Lushootseed from her parents. Thank you very much.